Hello, I'm Marco Galvan. Welcome to this class about equalization. Well, I'm a musical engineer, audio specialist, acoustic specialist. I'm also a musician, producer, arranger, composer. I've been working in the music industry for more than 15 years, and teaching for more than 10 years in universities and colleges. Some of my former students now are professionals working for companies like Sony Music, for Fox Sports, Meyer Sound, and many others. And well, let me tell you what you are going to learn in this class. You are going to understand the purpose of equalization, what equalizers are for, and what they cannot do. Then you're going to learn how to equalize different instruments in an efficient way. This in the context of a music mix. And all this is to improve the quality, clarity of your instruments, of your production. So, who should take this class? Well, this class is great for musicians, producers, DJs, podcasters, you name it. Any audio enthusiast can have good knowledge from this class. What do you need? Well, actually, you just need a digital audio workstation. It could be Pro Tools, Logic, Reason, whatever. And if you don't have one, you could download, for example, Studio One, Ardour, or Audacity. All those have free versions for PC and Mac, so you can work right away. So I hope you enjoy this class, and let's get started. Okay, now let's see what's the purpose of an equalizer. So equalization is made to compensate the frequency balance in a signal. That is to improve the amount of high frequency, low frequency, mid frequency, etc. This helps us to get more clarity or definition or punch in our signal. We have to be careful because too much EQ could be bad for the sound. Actually, usually less is more in equalization. For example, in this picture, we can see a lot of equalization. We have a lot of lows and mids, and it's too aggressive. That usually doesn't sound good. So we should avoid that kind of equalization. We could use equalization also to get special effects. For example, the sound of a telephone. If you want to reproduce that kind of effect, like somebody's talking on the phone, or the music coming out of a radio in post production, for example, that we could use equalization for that. Now, an equalizer, what we cannot do, well, we cannot fix a bad recording. If we have bad microphones or the take was bad, we cannot really fix that with EQ. Is not the best strategy. We cannot make speakers sound great with EQ. I mean, if the speaker is not good enough, then EQ won't is not a magic tool. If you have a good speaker, then EQ can improve it, but you need a good speaker. Another myth, for example, with EQ, you cannot remove distortion. If you are hearing a distorted sound, then you cannot really fix that with an EQ. The same with the noise. Perhaps with an EQ you could attenuate a little bit the noise, the background noise, but it's not the best tool for that. There are other tools just like that. For example, the denoiser, it's just for that. And finally, with an EQ, obviously we cannot improve a bad performance. So if the singer is out of tune or the player is, not doing a nice sound, you cannot really fix that with an EQ. You will need another kind of tool. Okay, now let's talk about frequency. Frequency means how fast an object vibrates. So if we have an object like, for example, a string vibrating really fast, then it has a high frequency and it makes a treble sound. On the other hand, a low frequency, slowly, that would produce a bass sound. Frequency is measured in hertz, that's the unit, and we use many times the term kilohertz. 1 kilohertz equals to 1000 hertz. There's another key term, which is octave. Octave means the double or half the frequency. So, for example, if we have the note A3, its frequency is 220. So the double that frequency, which is 440, it would be also the note A4, and the double of that would be the next A note. So that's what octave means. We use octaves when we are equalizing. Now, the hearing range, human hearing range, we cannot perceive every frequency. We can hear only frequencies between 20 and 20 kilohertz. Well, that's the standard, you know, like a kind of average. But our ear perceives mid frequencies with more sensitivity, around 3 kilohertz. So that's what this graphic represents. We also see here that the low and the high frequencies in the arrows, they need more energy to be perceived. So if you are boosting, for example, in 2 kilohertz, you will hear that amount of EQ very easily. But if you are boosting with your EQ around 80 hertz, sorry, then you will need more energy to perceive the change. You will see that later. This is because our ear is not linear. So it's important to understand that our ear behaves in a different way to different frequencies. That's very important when we are equalizing. Okay, so if we want to learn how to equalize, then we need to educate our ear to recognize some frequency ranges first. So here we're going to listen to some examples. I'm going to equalize these different ranges so you can hear the characteristics of each range. So the first one is the lowest. It's between 20 and 50 hertz, and it has two deep frequencies that is very difficult to listen, to hear them, to notice them. It's mainly used for effect sounds like earthquakes or explosions in movies. So in this case, you will need a subwoofer to hear it. You may try it with headphones or good monitors, but it's going to be a little hard to listen to it. And please be careful with the volume in the example, and let's start. Okay, so as you as you can see, it's not easy to hear it, right? It's because the speakers. Then we have this next range is about 1 octave above. It's between 50 and 100, around that. It's the punch of the sound. You will hear the punch of the bass, the bass guitar or the kick drum. It's important, and it's also very effective if you have a subwoofer, but if you don't, you can hear anyway with a good pair of headphones or studio monitors. Let's give it a try. Okay, the next one is called the upper bass range. It's around 100 and 200 hertz. This is important because it may sound boomy or muddy. So it's important to listen to the characteristics of trombones, male vocals, piano, toms in this range. Sometimes, for example, the bass guitar needs to be attenuated in this range if it's sounding too muddy, you know. So let's give it a try. Then the next is the low mid range, which has the fullness of sound. You will hear many resonances here, and it could saturate the spectrum. You know, it could be a little annoying, yeah, too dirty. So let's hear it. Well, let's continue with the next part of the range, the mid-range. This is the most important for voice, and you should be careful about this range because it may sound like a telephone. It's also important for consonants, and pretty much every kind of speaker works in this range. So let's hear it. Well, the next range, the high mid, is between 2 kilohertz and 5 kilohertz. This is a very important range because our ear is very sensitive in this range, as we said before. So this may cause some kind of ear fatigue or harshness. It could be annoying. So if you find a sound being annoying and irritating, you should try cutting in this range. Then we are moving to the treble range. The highs is between around 5 kilohertz and 12 kilohertz. These ranges are, like not exact ranges, but it's approximation. So in this range, you will find the brightness of the sound. And also you may find sibilance, which is this characteristic of an excessive S sound. It's very important for hi-hat cymbals, treble instruments. So let's hear it. Well, it's important to say that these ranges, these last ranges, the highs in general, need a tweeter so you can hear them. If you don't have tweeters, it's very difficult. And this is the last range between 12 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz. It's the top treble range. And well, this will give some kind of sparkle or air sensation to the sound. It's not easy to hear because not everybody is able to hear these high frequencies, but let's try it. Well, I recommend you to practice a little bit with this material over and over so your ears get the idea of how these ranges sound and what they do in music. That's the basis of equalization. Okay, now let's learn how to use a parametric EQ, which is the most important EQ. But first, we need to understand the concept of gain. So, gain is usually measured in dBs. And when we have positive gain, positive dBs, that means that we increase the signal's energy. On the other hand, if we have 0 dB, that means no change in signal's energy. It's also called unity gain. That's the most important setting. Actually, we should start equalizing with our EQs at 0 dB. It's also called flat EQ, no increase. And if we have negative dBs, that means that we are decreasing the signal's energy. So this is how we can change our energy in different frequencies. Infinite dB, that's an infinite attenuation. That's usually for faders. When we have the fader in the bottom, that means that we have no energy at all. Now, interesting things about the dBs, for example, 0 dBs, as I said, means no change in signal. So it doesn't mean no energy. It means that the energy remains the same as the original. Then 1 dB is barely heard by some people, so most of the time 1 dB cannot be perceived. On the other hand, 3 dBs is our basis. We're going to equalize most of the time in 3 dB steps, and 10 dB is a lot of energy. It's kind of twice as loud, so 10 dB is a lot. We have to take that in account. Now, our parametric EQ. The parametric EQ has 3 parameters. That's the name. And we have these 3 controls. It's the central frequency, which is the middle frequency in our filter, in our EQ. Then we have the gain, which could boost or cut the amount of energy. Remember, 0 dB means everything normal, let's say. And there's the third parameter is the Q. Q is somehow mysterious parameter related with the bandwidth. This is how many frequencies around the central frequency we are affecting. So, for example, in this case, the quality factor, the Q factor, is related with bandwidth. It doesn't have any unit. And, for example, we can see that low values of Q, for example, 0.3, 0.4, it's like a very wide, the frequency range. On the other hand, high values, for example, 5, 6, 10, it's very narrow filtered. This is a very important tool because this helps us to select the frequencies we want to equalize. This is why parametric EQs are very, very powerful, and that's why we're going to learn to use them.
Hello guys. Well, now we're going to see the practical part of this. So we're going to equalize the kick drum. So I have here an equalizer, a session. You're going to work with this session, but let me show you this equalizer. It's from Logic Pro, but you could use any other equalizer that you may have. So let's hear it. The first thing you have to do before equalizing is actually hear the sound of the instrument. So in this case, I have this frequency analyzer, so I can see that my kick drum has a lot of energy in the lows and less energy in the highs. So it's important to take into account this, because in this case, as the kick drum has a lot of low energy, it's not necessary in many cases to boost this region. So my approach would be to listen to what you don't like from the sound. In this case, it's a resonance. So I'm going to show you. Let me activate one parametric EQ. Here it is. So we have our 3 parameters. It's frequency, gain, and Q. So I'm going to boost and listen to that. Around 12 dB is okay most of the time. So now I can change my frequency. This is what it is called sweeping. And you can hear all those resonances. Okay. Maybe it's a little wide, so I'm going to make it narrower with a higher Q. I could use my mouse instead, which actually it is simpler. The point is to look for resonances. For example, we know that around 60 we have the punch, and we can feel that. In the case of the kick drum, it's very common to attenuate this region. We have to look this kind of muddy sound. So I'm going to attenuate that and maybe make it a little wider. So it's kind of better. It's a matter of taste here. Now I'm going to add a little bit of presence. I'm going to use other parametric EQ. I want more attack. Perhaps a little here. It's a matter of taste. You need to hear what you want from the sound. And finally, just to make an example, I'm going to add a little punch. It may not be necessary, but I want to show you. So another filter, another parametric. And as you can see, I have to play with the three parameters: the frequency, the gain, and the EQ to look for the frequency I like or the one I don't like. For example, this sounds nice, but I'm just going to add a little bit. So you can see my equalization. I have a little boost here, a bigger cut here, and a little boost here. So now let's hear the whole process. I'm going to bypass my EQ. That's before EQ. And that's with EQ. It is more solid. So that's pretty much the idea. You have to practice, of course, but you could use these frequencies as a basis. I'm using 63, 350, and 2.5 kilohertz. The amount of equalization is up to you, but you don't need a lot of EQ, so be careful. Hello guys. Well, now we are going to work with the snare drum. Here we have the snare drum. This is the analyzer, the spectrum. And so, as we can see here, there's this part here around 200 Hertz. Well, that's the fundamental frequency of the snare. That is the lowest frequency coming out from that drum. So every drum has a fundamental frequency, and if we look for that frequency and we raise it, the effect will be as we are listening. Let me adjust the Q. It has more bottom, and if we take it out, we take away the foundation of that sound. So that's very important. Actually, in this case, I don't think it's necessary to touch that frequency. So for the snare drum, what you have to do is to listen to the sound and to try to figure out what you want. For example, maybe I want to control these 500 Hertz resonances. I could get rid of them, or at least attenuate them. Or maybe I want some brightness. You know, the snares produce high frequency. It's around 4 kilohertz. So, well, pretty much that's for the snare. It's up to you to define the final sound. Now, I'm going to tackle the cymbals in this session. Cymbals have a very important frequency, and I'm talking about the around 4 kilohertz. Let me adjust the Q so it's narrower. These frequencies are somehow annoying, so I usually have to take them away a little bit. Well, maybe that's too much. Maybe 3 for the bass. Okay, that could be good. Or I could add some treble, you know, around 9 or 10. So for example, for the cymbals, maybe I could just take this, and with this band, I could take out this 4 kilohertz annoying frequency, because that's very important. Sometimes this kind of setting is more than enough for the cymbals. Also, we could use a high pass filter, which is here. It just attenuates, and maybe around 200-300 Hertz to get rid of the rumble, the bass rumble. But this kind of EQ could work for cymbals, because we are bringing a little more brightness. And the most important is to take out this middle high frequencies. The treble here around 10 or 12 kilohertz is entirely optional. Okay, well, now we're going to work with a bass guitar. So here I have the analyzer, and we can see that the bass guitar has plenty of energy in the low frequency. That's obvious. But actually, equalizing the bass guitar uh, doesn't require to boost this region usually, because the bass already has a lot of low frequency. So boosting lows, it may work, but it may sound muddy. Mainly around 100 and 150, all this area could be very muddy. If you are hearing this with your good headphones or monitors, you will notice the energy. If you are using little speakers, you may not notice a lot of this, but that's why it's very important to have proper monitors to equalize, because it could be deceptive. So, well, in this case, more important frequency for bass guitar would be this low mids around 500, 800, those frequencies. Okay, because these frequencies give the bass more definition of the notes, so that's usually more important. See? We have to be careful of not letting this sound too hunky, but it's up to you. Now, the key to equalize bass is to relate it with the kick drum. So, for example, I must hear the kick drum and the bass working together. That's the key of EQ. If you work in a separate way, as I've been doing it, just to show you, well, it's not going to be very nice. You know, the blending will not be correct. So, for example, here I have the kick drum and the frequencies we mentioned before. And for example, I added a little bit around 50 hertz, you know, really low bottom. So a rule of thumb is that in my bass, I shouldn't add around 50 in this example, because that's a frequency for the kick drum. So my bass maybe could work a little better here. I don't know. We should try it. But the point is that I need to get a good blend between the two instruments. So even sometimes this is not the case, but there could be some situation where I would need to lower the low frequency of the bass or the kick drum's low frequency. So that's very important in these cases. We need to be sure that my low frequency from the bass and the kick drum are not fighting each other. And that's what EQ is for, and that's why we need to hear both instruments. This is going to be the rule for every instrument sharing similar frequency ranges. Okay, well, now we're going to work with vocals, which is our last example. So in this case, I have this female vocal. Okay. I'm going to analyze it. Well, the vocals have a lot of energy in many frequencies, as we can see. So it's important to be careful when we are equalizing vocals. So what can we do about it? Well, in first place, remember that we have this area around 200. It's the body. Let me try it. So, as you can see, I am sweeping to try to recognize the characteristics. For example, here I find the fundamental tones. It's the body of the voice, which is okay. If we deal with male voices, the low frequency would be one octave below, I mean around 100, 150. So in this case, I don't think that the voice needs more body. You know? Let's see what's going on here in a minute. This range The mid-range is very important for vocals because it gives you presence and definition. A key frequency is around 1.5 kilohertz. Okay, but we have to be careful of not making this sound like a telephone or a radio, you know, around here. So we may need just a little bit of EQ, maybe that. Look, I'm talking about 2 dB, so that's common, you know. Now I could add some high frequency. It has a very low Q. This will give us that sparkle, right? Maybe something like that, okay? Just 1 dB or so, you know, because this was recorded with good microphones. Now I am hearing a resonance. It's around here. I don't like this. It sounds like a box or something. I'm going to take a little bit out. Let's compare. Maybe even less mids. Okay. So in this way, we can use the equalizer exactly in the same way to adjust our voices. Of course, I could do this in a more aggressive way, but you have to be careful. For example, doing this, it's way too much, more than 12 dB. So I recommend to stay calm, just give little steps, around 3 dB steps, and wait a little more to listen for the real effect. And then if you decide that you need more EQ, then just apply a little bit more. But it's better to remain conservative in this way. Okay, well, this is the last part. I'm going to show you the whole project. You are going to mix this song. Let me So there's the complete band. You have vocals, drums, brass, piano. So the point is that you have to make your own mixing using, you know, as a practice, as I told you. I want to show you. I have equalized the whole song, every single track, and I want to show you. I have different equalization schemes for the different instruments. So if you want to hear the difference without any EQ, there you go. So it gives more clarity. That's the idea. So I want to give you one last advice. That's very important. It's called to compensate. And let's try it with the kick drum. For example, in this case, if I'm using an equalization, I have to be sure that my overall loudness is not affected. So that's why we have this gain in every equalizer to compensate for that. For example, if I take this out, the volume changes. So if I notice a change in volume, I need to compensate lowering or increasing the gain, you know. It's like the volume, because the goal is that the volume is not affected with the EQ. For example, let me say that I use this kind of extremely aggressive equalization just to show you something like that. The version without EQ is softer, so I need to compensate my EQ lowering the gain. So when I compare, I could compare with the same loudness or similar loudness. So in this case, I have to lower the gain because I boosted too many frequencies. But if I was cutting, then the opposite applies. If this was my equalization, then I need to increase the gain to compensate for my EQ. So that's pretty much the point, and I hope you can enjoy the song I prepared for you, and see you next time.